All right, hello and welcome. Today's stream I guess is going to be a little bit different than usual. One moment. First of all, I'm streaming on the weekend. I can't remember the last time that I've done that. It's been a while, again, trying to get back into the routine. And also a bit of an update in terms of, for the past 2 weeks, there was no biochemistry lecture on Wednesday. It seems like moving forward, I'll be doing them solo, which is totally fine. Essentially, they couldn't make the commitment, which is totally fine. No hard feelings. But I plan to continue the lecture series and, hopefully cover the entire textbook, however long that takes, probably years. The biochemistry lecture should be returning this Wednesday at the usual scheduled time, but they will be solo, which, there's the con that I don't have, the student on stream, but I guess there's the potentially advantage of I can pay more attention to chat and take questions from chat more actively, all that stuff. So whatever, maybe it balances out. I don't know, we'll find out. Or again, maybe if there's zero interest in the biochemistry lectures, I will stop doing them. But today, as I posted in the Discord, I'm going to be essentially going over my experience that took place actually almost a year ago at this point, like November of last year. So whatever, 9 or 10 months ago. Where, as I mentioned before, I was hired by this company, this biotech startup, and I was fired after 5 days. I've spoken a little bit about it here and there. But then I decided to pretty much do a full write-up on Substack about it. That includes audio recordings. I recorded the audio of a final meeting with them. and I checked whether I was legally allowed to do so, and yes, I was legally allowed to do so, as in I checked before actually recording the meeting. I didn't check after the fact whether it was legal or not. I'll probably just change my screen right now. Okay, well yeah, this is what I wrote. Okay, so it's not made available to the public yet, although I don't really expect anybody to read a Substack post that I wrote. But I posted it in the Discord, so feel free to join the Discord if you want, because it's there. But basically, yeah, I haven't made it public yet. And it took me quite a while to write it out and organize it, and I also got feedback, okay, from some online friends, Eucharist and iCalrich. Very grateful for their feedback. And I plan to basically, you know, make it public or publish it to the public sometime this coming week. But before I do that, I figured I might as well go over it on stream. And also, this is kind of me cheating in the sense that this is my way of like giving it one last proofread before I, you know, make it public. And also, if anyone, I guess, has any questions, you know, they can ask me in real time. But yeah, that's pretty much the plan for this stream, and tomorrow I plan to be hopefully back with my typical science and news streams, going over research and science and news. Maybe I'll also do that today if there's time. So what I wrote, okay, it took me a while to write because, well, one, I'm not a particularly fast writer. I think I'm an okay writer, but I don't write very quickly. Well, yeah, it took a while to like organize it and you know, extract the audio clips. You know, I didn't post the full meeting because, you know, some, let's say, whatever, confidential / sensitive information was whatever put forth in the meeting, but I extracted what I think was you know, the relevant parts. But also, I'm biased, so, you know, don't necessarily well, I'm not making the claim that this is the full unbiased version of the events. This is my perspective only. But yeah, if there's any time after going over this, I'll probably maybe cover a little bit of science and research and whatever. We'll see how far we get. But yeah, pretty much I'm just going to read my own Substack because, again, this is pretty much just my way of, well, yeah, getting questions about it and also proofreading my own work, which, again, I've read this, you know, dozens and dozens of times now, but each time that I read it, you know, I always find a new mistake, or, you know, I always feel like I want to tweak it in some way. And also just to, like, put it out there in the ether of, like, yeah, this is my recounting of what occurred. So, diving right into it. Oh, Bob Marley, welcome. Great to see you. Hope you're doing well. I imagine whatever summer's wrapping up for you and you are starting your graduate studies soon, or maybe you're still on vacation. But either way, I hope you're doing well. Always a pleasure to see you. And yeah, getting back into the swing of streaming. And I hope, or I shouldn't say hope, I know pretty much once you start grad studies, like, you'll do well. If anything, you'll almost certainly thrive in graduate school. So, so this is the company, LE Health, and, you know, so they have since, so I wrote this piece, or rather I started writing this piece about whatever, 2.5 months ago, and during the time of writing it, they revamped their website. Okay, so pretty much, like, this is mostly what their website used to look like. Obviously, I added these logos there of whatever, the biohazard and, you know, the caution symbol. But this is essentially like the old version of their website. And their new version, I mean, I can show it. Where, yeah, they've revamped it. Okay, so, but as of right now, they don't have, from what I can tell, you know, given the fact that it says join waitlist, they don't have their product, you know, on the market yet. But they have revamped their website. So it's just, as of now, join waitlist for their future product, presumably. But yeah, so, as mentioned, This piece contains audio recordings that, at the time, I had no intention of publishing or using aside from my own personal records. I've had time to reflect, and I've obviously changed my mind. Yes, before I recorded the audio of the meeting, I absolutely checked I was legally allowed to do so. Turns out Quebec, Canada is a one-party consent state, where as long as you're part of the conversation, you can record the audio. Considering the meeting I recorded was specifically held to give me feedback, I'm fairly certain I was part of it. Well, I have no idea. I planned whatever. So I have my own LinkedIn profile. I plan to publish it to LinkedIn. Okay, whether anything happens from that, so I've gone back and forth in my mind, quite a bit of like, well, do I publish it? Do I make it available to the public? Do I even cover it? Do I even write out what I've written here? But as I outline here, I recognize that it will probably hurt my future job prospects, okay? Since what company wants to hire an employee that might expose them or actually hold them accountable? Not that I think I'm exposing anything, okay? I'm just giving my recounting and my recollection. I'm not necessarily making any grand judgments, just like this is what happened to me, okay, take it or leave it. At the time, I didn't enjoy what happened to me, but my motivations are largely to try to bring some transparency about what occurs in the biotech industry. But this is like one company, right? So if they message me, like, by all means, go for it. So even though I was fired after 5 days, okay, and all I signed was their offer letter. Okay, so I didn't sign any contract that restricts me from saying anything. I didn't sign any NDA or any whatever non-compete contract, although I think those are illegal. And so in some sense, it was, in retrospect, advantageous to be fired after 5 days, because I can say whatever I want. I'm not held to anything. I didn't sign any real official contract or whatnot. All that to say is we'll see how it turns out. At the end of the day, my expectation is I make this available to the public, and I plan to send it to a few people, mostly friends and family, and I guess maybe some online friends. And then whatever, we'll see what happens and what comes of it. I don't expect anything to come from it. But I do, for the sake of transparency, ultimately, I want it to be out there in the ether. And if this serves as a warning for other people in terms of, as I mentioned here, I don't want someone else to go through my experience. Not that it was the worst experience in the world, although it wasn't fun. But companies don't want to be transparent. And I think that's a problem. And so this is my attempt, although this is just my perspective, but this is my attempt at transparency. So, yeah, it will probably hurt my future job prospects since one company wants to hire an employee that might expose them or actually hold them accountable. However, since I value integrity, honesty, and transparency, I feel compelled to bring to light what I perceive to be bad or poorly run companies. At the very least, I don't want someone else to go through what I went through and be judged the way I was. I also want a written record I can refer people to, since I've recounted the story multiple times at this point. While people believe me when I tell them of my experience, they still find it somewhat shocking this occurred, so I want to put all the evidence out there and make it accessible. And lastly, for the sake of transparency, as a point of pride, I want to maintain whatever semblance of a reputation I might have. So those are ultimately my reasons for why as of right now, I've decided to write it up, and I plan to publish it or make it available to the public in the coming week. So while I sense and hope my particular experience is an outlier in its egregiousness, from the conversations I've had with my friends, colleagues in biotech, mistreatment and a lack of good leadership appear to be commonplace. But again, just my perspective. Maybe I don't have a large enough sample size, or perhaps it's just the people I happen to surround myself with. Either way, from what I can tell, nobody seems to be satisfied. I'm absolutely not the arbiter of what makes a good leader or a scientist, but I think I'm slowly figuring out what doesn't. By my estimation, the incentives to do good science simply aren't there, either in academia or in industry. I have not, okay, and so, maybe, although I have absolutely no idea of what could happen illegally, The only, as mentioned, the only legal question is whether I was able to record the audio of the meeting that I recorded. And I answered that question way before I recorded the audio. I'm definitely not aware of every law out there, but I have not consulted any lawyer at all. So yeah, it's an overall emphasis on what I like to call the minimum publishable unit in academia and the absolute minimum workable product in industry. In essence, the standard quantity over quality, which is, nothing groundbreaking or new. I understand nothing will ever be perfect, deadlines have to be met, and productivity has to be measured somehow, but the balance just seems way off. While paper mills and actual sham papers don't help, I don't think it's a coincidence there was a record number of retractions last year, which almost certainly underestimates the magnitude of the problem. Which, I've covered this before, okay? Or rather, I cover retractions, and I try to cover poor science, and all that stuff. And yeah, I've linked to this article here. My Substack does contain links and references, and I try to back up what I say. So, I think I'm at least a competent scientist, and I simply want to carry out good quality science that is meaningful or impactful to me. So far, it looks like the biotech landscape doesn't allow for that. At least I haven't found it yet. As I'm going to make the case for, I suspect I was even fired by a group of scientists for being too competent and with no leadership insight to question it. So I haven't. Since as of right now, okay, you cannot access this without the link, although I'm showing the address to the link. But this is not available to the public yet, as in, it's still a draft in my Substack. And I can only share, the private link that Substack provides you. So I would not expect it to show up in a Google search, but I guess when I make it public sometime this upcoming week, I guess I'll see how it comes up in a Google search. I suspect it probably won't. I don't see why it would. Because as you can see here, at the top buttons, I still have under, it even says here in the top left, draft. But again, that should change in this upcoming week. I basically wanted to give, before making it public, anybody in my community that wants to get, advanced look at what I wrote, this is their opportunity too. Where was I? Yeah, no leadership insight. So, starting off with my experience. After being laid off from biotech startup in May 2023, I decided to take the summer off to enjoy and reflect on my recent experience in industry. And also, if there are any critiques on my writing, or if you spot any mistakes, feel free to give any feedback whatsoever. You could also say that I write terribly, or if it's just, you could also say, this is awful, don't publish it. That's also fair too. I applied to a few jobs here and there, but I didn't put in a great amount of effort in searching for a new role. Around September, I decided to actively look for another job, ideally in biotech. As I was browsing LinkedIn, I came across a job posting by Eli Health, although at the time I thought it was Eli Health, but I've learned it's Eli Health, which is another biotech startup I had heard my former CEO from the startup that just laid me off mention. They were looking to hire an R&D associate for lateral flow assay development. I read over what they were looking for, found out they had raised millions in funding, which there's this article here in Forbes. Okay. I haven't disabled my ad blocker, but either way, there's a Forbes article showing that they have raised millions in funding. Check the company website, which I've just shown, and given both my academic and industry research experience, thought I'd be perfectly suited to the role. What really resonated with me was they explicitly mentioned they value mindset and character. Furthermore, the goal of the company was certainly one I could get behind, developing at-home hormonal testing for women. Which here is essentially the LinkedIn posting, okay, or at least screenshots of it. Where, you can pretty much go through pretty much the entirety of the LinkedIn job posting at the time that I literally applied to. Although I underlined this, that they value mindset and character. And Deflux, welcome, great to see you. Shout out to you. Let's see if I can remember how to do this. Well, it might vary by like field or, type of industry. But although, not that I'm an expert on, startups, but, I have clearly some experience, at least 5 days, but I also worked for a few years with another startup, and I know other people in the startup space. And even when I recount this story, which I'm doing now, they seem to be pretty shocked. But yeah, as I mentioned, like whatever, basically mistreatment by companies. It's not foreign to me. But yeah, you can pretty much go through their LinkedIn posting. So, I had experience in just about everything they were looking for. I had extensive experience with immunoassays, ELISAs in both performing and teaching them to undergraduates, in vitro and point-of-care diagnostics, biosensors, microfluidics, bioconjugation, and antibody protein purification, which is pretty much going through all of the stuff that they were looking for. So, the educational requirements was bachelor's or master's in chemical engineering, bioengineering, analytical chemistry, biochemistry, whatever. I definitely have the bachelor's, okay? And I technically don't have the PhD, but I have both, whatever. I have PhD experience and I have industry experience. And so, as I make the case, I might have been overqualified for the job. So was I maybe a little overqualified for the role? Possibly, but I'm never looking to match a job with my credentials/experience. Ultimately, as mentioned, I simply want to do science that's meaningful and impactful to me, and this seemed like a place I could do that. The only significant thing I was missing was experience with lateral flow assays, or LFAs for short. Which, given the fact that LD Health was specifically developing LFAs, it might seem like a big deal. However, since I was an assay development scientist at my former company, specializing in surface plasmon resonance, or SPR, which shares many similarities with LFAs but is far more complicated, I was pretty confident I could learn about LFAs pretty quickly. As in, let's just say anybody, or, the niche people that are familiar with SPR, okay? I'm almost certain they would agree that SPR is way more complicated than lateral flow assays, okay? And if you're not familiar with lateral flow assays, as I mentioned here, if you've ever taken an at-home rapid COVID-19 test, that is a lateral flow assay, pretty much the antigen test, where pretty much you take your saliva sample, put it on the little spot on whatever, the stick there. Well, it's on their website, and this is what, let's say, your lateral flow assay can look like. Mostly just, some fancy whatever paper inside a plastic casing. Pregnancy tests, or at-home pregnancy tests, are also lateral flow assays. So it seemed I was exactly what they were looking for, so I was excited to apply. I was in an extremely fortunate position that my former CEO, Ludovic, knew Thomas Cortina, the CTO and co-founder of LE Health. So he sent out an email to make an introduction. Shortly afterwards, upon painstakingly preparing my CV and cover letter on October 11th, I emailed them to Thomas and also sent them through their LinkedIn job posting. I hear nothing at all until about 3 weeks later when Thomas eventually responds, and this is, the screenshot of the email that I received, which is basically, kicking off the interview process with their HR person. And so this is Thomas, a little bio, and so this is from the previous version of their website. Where yeah, Thomas, that's his background, is mechanical engineering and physics. So it took a while for a response, but at that point I was still looking forward to starting the interview process since I felt that if I actually got hired, I could bring a lot to the company. Their chief of staff, Zoya, based virtually in BC, quickly reached out to me, and on November 2nd, I officially started the interview process. So, here's the email that I received from Zoya, their HR person, who's, at least at the time, I assume they're still there, but I don't actually know, but at the time, based in BC. I assume Oily Olive, great to see you, hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for passing by. So yeah, their email, Dear Corey, this is in continuation to the email from Thomas to you earlier today. As a first step for the interview process, please take a moment to follow the instructions on this form, which I'm going to show, and submit your answers within the next 48 hours. Your efforts are greatly appreciated. So this is essentially, stage 1 of their interview process. So for the first step of the interview process, I was sent a company memo, which is right here, outlining their unique culture and the values they claim to stand for, which are grit, humility, collaboration, and learning. Okay, so this is the corporate memo that I was sent, okay, as part of the first stages of the interview process, where I was supposed to read this, okay? Well, I did read it. As in, after reading their memo and getting insight into their culture, I was supposed to fill out the following form, which is basically, given what you've read, do you still want to go through with it, continue with the interview process, and, explain, based on what I've read, why I'd be a good fit in the company. And I had to do a 1-minute video, okay, pretty much saying, like, why I would fit in, given their unique culture. Okay, so we can go over the corporate memo that they sent me on the culture fit for candidates. So hi there, we're excited that you're considering joining the Ellie team. At Ellie, we're not just a company, we're a community of passionate and mission-driven individuals fueled by shared values. So grit, definition, at least according to them, embracing the determination to tackle the toughest problems with unwavering commitment. Grit at Ellie represents our collective determination and resilience to undertake an ambitious mission, pushing technological boundaries and reshaping an industry, even in the face of the hardest challenges. It's not just about confronting obstacles head-on daily, but also about the passion and perseverance to achieve long-term goals. While we embrace the rigorous path we've chosen, it's our unyielding spirit and commitment to meaningful breakthroughs that set us apart. Our journey demands constant learning from failures, transcending our limits, and evolving both personally and professionally. So that's value number 1, is grit. Humility, their definition. Humility is the acknowledgement that our capacity to learn always exceeds our current knowledge. Humility isn't about lacking ambition, it's about operating with a low ego. It means not being selfish or having a constant sense of entitlement. It encourages self-awareness and an openness to feedback without feeling personally threatened or emotionally shaken. When there's an opportunity to improve, be it from self-observation, feedback from colleagues, or any other source, you are excited as it's a chance to grow. You know you're part of a team committed to doing the best work of their lives, and you understand that excellence is a continuous endeavor, one that starts with recognizing your own limitations. Grit is a word you only really hear in company or school values. Like exactly, just like the word synergy, right? Although I think that's now outdated, but like 10 years ago, whatever, synergy was the word. Now that there's, I've covered it myself, some of the scientific research on grit. Angela Duckworth is arguably the grit researcher. She has a TED Talk all about it. So it's and no surprise, just as the corporate world, although this is not scientific, but just as the corporate world, latches onto, the Myers-Briggs, the MBTI, the corporate world latches on to, buzzwords from academia, and tries to pass it off as, credible. So collaboration, their definition, collaboration is the shared accountability, ownership, and leadership by all team members to achieve a mission that transcends individual goals. So collaboration means taking responsibility even for aspects outside one specific role. Whether it's by saying, I'm taking responsibility for the health of this meeting, if there's a lack of trust, I'm going to address that, or if the goals are unclear, I'm going to deal with that. Everyone is invested in collective improvement. We're all interested in getting better, and everyone should take responsibility for that. If everyone is collaborative in that sense, the responsibility for team performance is shared. Collaborative people know that success is limited by the worst performers, so they are either going to elevate them or have a serious conversation, which, at least based off of my experience and just my perspective, there's some, I would say they're not living up to this value. But again, just my perspective. And their last core value is learning. It means possessing an insatiable hunger for learning and being able to climb steep learning curves day after day. Being smart at Ellie does not mean high IQ. It's about an unyielding desire to learn in an environment that demands constant evolution. We're not just developing tech, we're pioneering the unknown, reshaping an industry, and fundamentally altering the way we approach health. This monumental task requires that we constantly embrace change, actively seek out best practices, think independently, and with a first principles approach. For us, adaptability isn't just a virtue, it's a necessity. Our dedication to routine optimization allows us to channel our energies into challenges that truly ignite our creativity. So here is further context to assess if Ellie is the right fit for you. So obviously, as you can see, they have two columns, for whom Ellie is a fit and for whom not a fit. So I guess we'll go with, row by row. Those who resonate with Ellie's core values of grit, humility, collaboration, and learning, and will obviously, if you don't align with those values, not for you. Individuals who view extremely hard challenges as exciting opportunities for growth. And well, if you don't share that, not a good fit. Professionals who thrive in a fast-paced and high-growth environments that push boundaries. And not a fit if professionals who prefer a predictable and routine work environment, which, this is the nature of the startup world. Definitely recognize that at the time and even now. Those who believe in results-driven work and value output. Those who measure success by effort over outcomes or results. That would make you not a good fit. And well, again, as I'm going to make the case for, actually, I think it's explicitly clear since they will say it themselves, I got results. But those results, let's just say, despite the results that I got that were positive, apparently not good enough. So you would be a good fit if professionals who thrive when continuously pushed beyond their comfort zones. And professionals who prefer well-defined roles with predictable responsibilities, you're not a good fit. Individuals comfortable with unconventional work environments that require hard work, and whatever your typical 9 to 5, if you want that, then you're not a good fit. Professionals who are ready to fail 999 times if it means succeeding on the 1000th time. And then not a fit to those who might get discouraged or overwhelmed after repeated setbacks. And you are ready to tear down walls like a bulldozer to reach ambitious goals and deadlines, but you are not a good fit if you prefer to approach obstacles gradually and value extended contemplation before action. And you'd be a good fit if you prioritize and address the most critical and challenging tasks first. And then not a good fit, you gravitate towards familiar tasks and territories. And then when a group decision is made, you fully support its execution, even if it wasn't your initial idea. And then not a good fit if a group decision contradicts your initial idea, you might struggle to fully support it. And then you balance your intuition with the data and ensure decisions aren't driven by ego or emotions. That would make you a good fit. And then not a good fit if you may feel challenged when others don't share your personal convictions. And then you would fit in if you apply first principle thinking to bring unprecedented solutions to hard problems. And not a good fit if you prefer established methods and don't typically challenge the status quo. And good fit if you appreciate a work environment encouraging multidisciplinary perspectives and diversity. And not a good fit if you prefer being surrounded by people who have a similar path or background. And then a good fit, those who actively seek feedback as an opportunity for growth. And not a good fit, those uncomfortable with or defensive towards feedback. And then a good fit if you prefer learning independently by doing and are comfortable navigating ambiguity. And not a good fit if you prefer directive leadership styles or multiple peers doing similar work to you. And then you are mission-driven, fueled by a sense of purpose, and prefer tracing your own path. That would make you a good fit. And not a good fit if you are inclined to work in large companies offering established career trajectories. And then those who are willing to speak up transparently when there is a problem, that would make you a good fit. And those who have a hard time expressing problems or tackle delicate discussions, that would make you not a good fit. And then lastly, individuals keen on elevating collective performance as a team player, that would make you a good fit. And then not a good fit if individuals more tolerant of varied performance levels within a team setting. So that is their corporate memo. about, their corporate culture, so to speak. And so I was supposed to read that, and then based off of reading that, based on what you've read about our culture, is this the work environment you are looking for? On a scale of 1 to 10, I think at the time I answered like 9, maybe 10. And then, yeah, 1,000 character limit of like why I would be a good fit for the team. And then a 1-minute video pretty much saying, well, why I would be a good fit in this unique culture, as they say. So yes, that's right. I needed to make a 1-minute video detailing why I would excel there, given what I had just learned about their culture. Fortunately, I have some experience making online video content, so this wasn't all that difficult, and most of the time was spent writing my script. In the end, I was actually quite proud of the video I had produced. I submitted everything within the 48-hour deadline. So it's like, well, actually, I put some of my streaming skills to use. I literally used OBS, what I'm using to stream now, to make the 1-minute video. And I was, again, pretty proud of what I produced. So to their credit, I submitted everything on a Friday, and on early Monday, I was pleased to be informed I was moving on to the next phase of the interview process. So I get an email from Zoya, their HR person. Dear Corey, thank you for promptly submitting your application form and video. Your enthusiasm shines through. I'm thrilled to inform you that you've successfully advanced to the next phase of our selection process, the technical challenge and interview. You now have the opportunity to complete the technical challenge within the next 48 hours. Please send your responses by replying to this email and attaching them in a PDF file format. As you progress through our interview process, here's an overview of what to expect next: a technical interview, a culture assessment, a deep dive into our culture with our management team, and if all goes well, a final offer, followed by a reference check. Should you have any questions or require further clarification before starting the technical challenge, please don't hesitate to reach out. I eagerly anticipate reviewing your responses and getting to know you better. Applications are so awkward for you. Yeah, like I definitely don't enjoy whatever the interview process. And there's a reason why, well, there's multiple reasons why I'm essentially self-employed now. Although I might have a little bit of an update on that somewhere down the line. Still technically self-employed, and I plan to be, at least for the next little while, or maybe ideally forever. But like, yeah, well, okay, when it comes to like interviews and screening processes, like I'm not really, I'm good at them, as in like, I think I interview well, like I'm not nervous about them. I think there's a reason why, okay, like I made it through, I technically made it through this interview process, which was, many, many steps. But like, I don't enjoy them. Not that like, yeah, just because I don't feel the need to sell myself. Like, I'll present like who I am, like whatever, this is my experience. Like I'm sort of generally of the attitude of like, take it or leave it. Like I don't, I mean, I care a little bit, but I don't really care all that much. Like I could take a rejection, but if I'm not the right fit, I'm not the right fit. And like, I'm pretty confident in, the skills that I've cultivated. Like I'm always willing to learn. Like, yeah, I basically, I don't market myself when it comes to like an interview process. Like I try not to embellish, and I try not to like put spin on things to like make things look better. It's just like, whatever, here's who I am, take it or leave it. Basically, I guess I tried to be like authentic. And I know almost certainly that hurts me, at least in the initial stages of a screening process, of like looking at applications, looking at cover letters, where it's like, yeah, pretty much, like I'm not looking to like game the system, or like, making sure that I include the keywords that they're looking for. But all that to say is like, yeah, I agree with you. They're pretty awkward and disingenuous. So the next step was to complete their technical challenge, which, I showed this in the Discord, and I believe I've showed it on stream before. Not now. Okay, not now. Alright, well, whatever. So yeah, this is the technical challenge. Okay. This is the the unfilled out version, but I believe I'm going to show my answers. But this is basically what they sent me. Okay. So, yeah, the next step was to complete their technical challenge, which thankfully didn't turn out to be all that challenging. Aside from the questions about designing an LFA and LFA performance trends, since again, I had never worked directly with LFAs at that point. So basically, wasn't really super challenging. Only really the questions that are unique to like what they are doing, as in designing lateral flow assays. But like, yeah, I figured it out. But the rest of the stuff was pretty, straightforward, at least somewhat elementary to me. So yeah, but with my experience in SPR and a little research, I was able to figure those questions out fairly easily. In actuality, most of the time was spent formatting things legibly and actually writing down the step-by-step calculations with units, since in the lab at this point, I'm accustomed to doing calculations and keeping track of units mentally. Even though the questions themselves were not particularly challenging, I spent a lot of time double and triple checking all my answers and making sure everything I was writing was clear and comprehensible. I submitted my technical challenge within the 48-hour deadline. So here's the answers to my technical challenge, which, I've shown this before. Where it's like, yeah, again, I tried to, write legibly. Okay, even though I think my writing's pretty decent, but, yeah, I'm printing here. Pretty much I spent a lot of time, formatting and making sure everything's, at least in my mind, crystal clear. Here are my answers. This is what I'm doing. And also I kind of, here, I write down, I potentially point out a mistake. Or I don't know if this is like a trick that they built into the question, or the person writing the question is just incompetent, but they're basically saying, at least in one of the questions, they say, on one of your instruments, you get this value. Okay, well, the value there is 35.3. And on that particular instrument, you get that value, you're doing something wrong. So I don't know if that was a test or not, but that's why I wrote that little note there next to that number saying, well, okay, assuming this is real, okay, this is how I'd go about it. But in reality, if this instrument gave this reading, I'm starting over. But yeah, all that to say, I completed the technical challenge. So, even though I didn't find it all that challenging, and I was proud of what I submitted, I was still a tiny bit nervous, since, well, you never know. About 48 hours later, Zoya kindly informed me I made it to the next step, the technical interview. So, dear Corey, thanks for submitting your technical challenge. I'm happy to tell you that you made it to the next interview step, technical interview. For the interview, you can select a time here, blah, 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 scheduling. So, on November 15th, I had the technical interview virtually with two of their scientists, James and Nellie, which, we will, you're going to see them soon. It was a fairly standard interview. I shared my academic and industry research experience and how my expertise with SPR should translate nicely to LFA development. I don't know for sure, but not only did it seem like they were not familiar with SPR, it seemed like they had never heard of it. In the back of my mind, I thought it was a tad strange, since I knew SPR had been used for LFA development, which I provide a reference for. Which, yeah, there's a reason why I say, given my, let's say, whatever, I'm not going to label myself as an expert in SPR, but whatever, as someone competent in SPR. Okay, LFAs, pretty much more straightforward. And SPR is even used to develop lateral flow assays. But they didn't seem to be aware of that, or they didn't seem to be at all familiar with SPR. Which is not super surprising, since it's a very niche technique, although, I would say any good, whatever, biologist or molecular biologist should at least be aware of it, that it exists. But regardless, I didn't think much of it. They shared what their day-to-day looked like and the type of research and development I'd be doing if I were to get the position. All of about 2 minutes was spent going over my technical challenge, since I essentially made no mistakes. I made 2 minor mistakes, and I didn't even consider one of them a mistake, since in my opinion it was the result of a poor wording of the question. I was proud of my performance on the technical challenge, so I wasn't going to contest it or argue with them. The technical interview ended after about 45 minutes, and I awaited their response. Yeah. So, there was like, I think, one actual minor mistake on the technical challenge. At least in my mind, one minor mistake. In their mind, it's two minor mistakes. So, just a few hours later, and again, to their credit, after the actual interview with those two scientists there, like, they responded pretty quickly. Zoya shared the good news. They wanted to proceed to the in-person interview. So, hi Corey, I want to start by congratulating you on getting this far in the interview process. We recognize that it's a long process, but we make no compromises in finding the people who will be the best fit for our work environment. We found that you are aligned with the position and we have open, and your mindset aligns with our core values. We want to move to the next step, which is our, did I misplace something? Oh yeah, which is our cultural forum and in-person interview. This is correct. Would you be available for an in-person interview at our office, blah, blah, blah. We look forward to receiving your response and getting to know you better. So yeah, pretty much going to their office and, well, meeting the people and seeing their office and an in-person interview. I was fairly ecstatic at this point since I'd put a lot of time and effort into this interview process and I was in the final stages. However, I knew it wasn't a done deal and all my efforts could still be for naught. I filled out their cultural form, okay, and their cultural form is also pretty lengthy. Pretty much a lot of questions. How would you summarize what Ellie is all about to someone who doesn't know the company? Can you describe your ideal company culture? Professional goals, personal goals. How would I describe my leadership style? Can you give an example that illustrates that? Tell me about an extremely hard goal you set recently. What did you do to achieve it? What was the process and the purpose? Oh, and Jack, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. I hope you recovered from, the allergies. Great to see you. And well, yeah, like, maybe I'm too charitable. I don't know, but I try to be charitable. Think about a time when your team accomplished a big goal. What was the goal? Blah, blah, blah. But basically, 20 questions. I would say largely like a personality profile and like trying to see how you would work in a professional environment. And, getting more insight into your professional goals and long-term goals. So yeah, which was about a dozen questions trying to assess my personality, my professional goals, and how I'd be in a workplace environment. It took quite a long time, but I filled out the form before the in-person interview. And, I think I gave fairly detailed answers. The in-person interview took place on November 17th. I was met with Thomas, where I was given a tour of the office and lab space, met James and Nellie in person, and met their third scientist, Jocelyn. Thomas then guided me to the conference room where Zoya was called on Zoom for the actual in-person interview amongst the three of us. They shared their whole philosophy about how they're trying to do things differently as a company, essentially went over their values from the memo, and what their expectations are. I shared how I think their values are aligned with my own personal values, gave examples from my own life, and how my extensive academic and industry research experience and expertise with SPR can be of great benefit to the company. I can't say for certain, but I got the sense they were enthusiastic about me. After the in-person interview, I briefly chatted with all three of their scientists to get to know them better. I left their office feeling pretty good about all aspects of the in-person interview and waited for their response. So, again, I don't know for sure, but, let's say the vibes that I were getting seemed to feel pretty positive. I was still around, but the Benadryl did not, well, I'm glad I can say for myself that when I take, Benadryl, I'm gone. Although, whatever, I don't take Benadryl for that reason. Because it just, knocks me out completely. So, but yeah, I got a tour of their office, okay? I had the in-person interview with Thomas and Zoya, who was conferenced in, because they're based in BC. And it's pretty standard. And yeah, like I said, the vibes that I was getting felt pretty positive. So just hours later, the same day, Zoya emailed me letting me know I had essentially secured the position. Provided my references check out, and I have a final meeting with the CEO and other co-founder, Marina. They were eager to have me on board. So, Corey, it was a real pleasure meeting you in person today. We love the alignment with values and feel confident that you could be a good cultural fit with our team. To expedite the process, here are the next steps. And when I say they wanted me on board pretty quickly, I think I had, this is November 17th. I believe that was a Friday. I think I just read it. But either way, like, they wanted me to start, like, really quickly. Like, I think the in-person interview was, like, on a Friday, and they were looking like, hey, on Monday after the weekend, can you start? Or, like, Tuesday. And I was like, I need a little bit more time than that. So, yeah, there's the offer discussion call. So I propose a brief call tomorrow, and this call tomorrow would be a Saturday, because, again, the in-person interview was on a Friday. And, yeah, final interview with our CEO and co-founder, Marina. So schedule that. So, unless something egregious happened with my references and or I completely fumbled the interview with Marina, which I sensed was largely a formality at that point, I got the job. I was obviously overjoyed that I had basically landed the position, and a small sense of relief was setting in because the long interview process that I felt like I nailed every part of was coming to an end. I shared my 3 references, which included my former CEO, who has a PhD and postdoc in chemistry, from the company that laid me off a few months prior, and had the final interview with Marina on November 21st. Since Marina was out of town at the time, we had the interview virtually, which went well in my mind. Finally, they made an offer, which, this is the offer letter that I signed. Feel free to read it if you want. Yeah, it does include my salary, start date, etc., etc. But whatever, standard offer letter. And so, yeah, this is the co-founder and CEO of the company, as in Thomas and Marina. They're not only professional partners, but I believe they're personal or whatever, romantic partners. But yeah, their background is data science and media, but basically, not the life sciences, at least not in my mind. So, I signed it while fully recognizing it was just an offer letter and not any sort of detailed legal contract. I assumed that would come sometime later, or after some sort of probationary period. In retrospect, it allows me to write this since I'm not subject to any sort of NDA. After jumping through a bunch of hoops over the course of about 3 weeks, I had finally secured another job in biotech where I was excited to put my skills to use. Full relief set in. Yeah, well, I know repeat founders at least, whatever, buzzwords for it's like, oh, we've done this multiple times now. We're really good. Again, trying to put that positive things on in. No, I mean, in reality, it probably is like a red flag. These are all things, I knew these things at the time, but, there are many such cases of, people, founding many companies, and, not everything succeeds on day one or after, one company. So I didn't think it was totally, out there that they had tried previous things and failed. You only hope that you learn from the failures. So Zoya shared their onboarding schedule, and my official start date as an R&D scientist was on Monday, November 27th. So here's their onboarding, what they had in mind for me. Okay, Monday, November 27th. Okay. But yeah, pretty standard stuff. But feel free to look at it if you want to. Take note, most of my time is spent, not surprisingly, with their scientists, mostly James and Jocelyn, which, yeah, you can see from the onboarding schedule. With who? So yeah, we have Thomas, we have Jocelyn, Marina, Zoya, Jocelyn, Ellie team, Jocelyn, James and Nellie, Jocelyn, James and Nellie, Jocelyn, but basically, yeah, James and Jocelyn. So I had no real expectation they would strictly adhere to their own schedule. I know things rarely, if ever, go according to plan, and it being my first week, I expected the days to go a little longer. I'm also no stranger to a startup environment, and I value grit just as they claim to. So, here's pretty much my recountings. I try to be brief, but brief recountings of the days. The 5 days that I was, at least 5 days that I was there actually working, and then whatever, the 6th day, the Monday afterwards, where you don't have that final meeting. So day 1, I gleefully walked into their office at the scheduled 10 a.m. start time and was warmly greeted by everyone, including the other R&D scientist, Eliana. They also hired in addition to me, who received their bachelor's in neuroscience literally just months prior. So yeah, in addition to hiring me, they hired this other person, Eliana, who's just recently graduated from neuroscience. They received their bachelor's. So, about a half dozen pristine white balloons were set up at my desk where a MacBook Air was waiting for me. The day unraveled more or less according to the onboarding schedule. Mostly getting a tour of the place, setting up our computers, getting acquainted with everyone, and Marina giving a corporate presentation about the company's mission and overall business plan. Essentially, getting a lay of the land. Eliana and I left the office together, I believe around 5:30, 6 p.m. And I got to know her a little bit. Throughout the brief time that I was there. We pretty much spent the entire time, like, side by side, getting trained. And at the end of most of the days there, like, we would leave together since we happened to take the same public transit in the same direction. So that was day one. Day two, the second day was basically devoted to shadowing the scientists, mostly James and Jocelyn, and learning about lateral flow assays, or LFAs, and the research and development Eliana and I would be carrying out on a regular basis while we were there. Since I had extensive lab experience, there was nothing particularly new to me, aside from the few instruments and materials specific for constructing their LFAs. Eliana and I left the office together around 6 p.m. So, day 3. This is the first day I was actually going to do something in the lab and perform an experiment, as in up until this point, it was all basically just shadowing. And just observing, listening, taking some notes, but as I am transparent about later on, I don't take the most detailed notes. At least when it comes to lab work. At least not initially. So Eliana and I had a meeting with James to discuss the experiments we'd be performing. We'd be running different experiments. However, once the meeting ended, I had to wait for James to actually write out the basic experimental protocol I would be following. After about an hour, James had finished writing the protocol, and after briefly going over it with him, off I went into the lab. In my opinion, it was a pretty poorly written protocol, and from what I can tell, this was a full experiment similar, if not identical, to what I'd essentially be carrying out regularly for the position. According to the schedule, executing the experiment was supposed to take 1 day. As I was progressing through the experiment, it quickly became clear to me there was no way either me or Eliana would be able to finish our respective experiments according to the scheduled time. After discussion and approval from James and Jocelyn, Eliana and I halted our experiments at appropriate steps that would allow us to resume the next day. I left the office at around 9 p.m., and I believe Eliana left shortly afterwards. So yeah, they gave us a full experiment that they expected us to pretty much complete that day, and like the next day would be for like data analysis and other stuff. Well, I can go back to the onboarding schedule, actually. Where are we at? Wednesday, okay, experiment discussion, and then 10:30 a.m. to 5 p.m., although again, they didn't stick to this schedule. Experiment execution. And then Thursday was like experiment discussion with data analysis. Okay, so pretty much experiment execution carried over into Thursday. So we're at day 4. So even though the experiment was supposed to take 1 day, and I worked on it for the vast majority of the previous day, there was still a considerable amount left to do for both Eliana and I. Eventually, we both wrapped up our experiments and collected the data on USB. Since it was already quite late, I then received a pretty rushed and poor explanation of how to analyze the data from James. Perhaps I'm an idiot, but asking questions didn't seem to clarify things further for me, so given that it was spreadsheet data in Excel, I was confident I could eventually figure it out on my own. I think it was already around 10 p.m. at that point, so I opted to leave and do the data analysis at home. Since the assay meeting going over everyone's data and experiments was scheduled for 9:30 a.m. the next day, it was expected I have my analyzed data ready for that meeting. I stayed up until around 2 a.m. and got it done. As in, I figured out how to analyze, I extracted the data from the, Excel document or extracted the relevant data from the Excel document, graphed it. I still technically have it, in my possession. But yeah, analyzed it, got it ready for presentation. So, day 5, the Friday. I arrive at the office at 9 a.m., and we have the assay meeting, including Thomas, one of the co-founders and CTO, at roughly 9:30 a.m. Some team members were late, which is a common theme. I present my data, and from everything that I could tell, my experiment was successful. Thomas even seemed surprised and impressed, since apparently I was given an experiment that no one had run before, and my results actually provided answers that looked very encouraging for future areas of research they'd want to pursue. Everyone else presented their results, and since an experiment from one of the scientists didn't work out as expected, standard discussions about troubleshooting took place. During these troubleshooting discussions, I was even able to answer a simple question that no one else seemed to know the answer to. The meeting wraps up, and I was told inventory wasn't going to be done, and I could spend the rest of the time entering my data, both raw and analyzed, into their data management system, along with writing up a full report on my results. I oblige and get to work on it. It's 4 p.m. and it's time for the Friday forum. So all the team members in the office gather in the conference room, and we video in the other team members located remotely, such as Zoya, as in, whatever. The main office is, close to me. But they have some other team members spread out. Zoya's in, British Columbia, and I believe they have some team members in, Ontario, and I think even some of them located somewhere in the United States. But either way, we're all in the conference room, either in person or remotely. I'm introduced to the people I haven't met yet, and we go around the room essentially sharing how our week has been and the highlights and any lowlights. I highlighted the warm welcome I received, including the balloons, and given the fact that the heating in the building was malfunctioning that week, my lowlight was the office being quite cold. That got a little bit of a laugh. The forum wraps up, and I ask if there's anything else I need to do aside from having the full report about my results ready for Monday, to which I'm told no, and I can leave if I want. It's around 6 p.m., and before leaving, I walk into the lab and thank James, Jocelyn, and Nellie for their help and patience throughout the week. No surprise to the people that know me, I head to the gym immediately afterwards. As I'm working out, I receive a notification on my phone at around 8 p.m. that I have received an email. It's from Zoya wanting to set up a meeting before Monday. An orange hue, welcome, great to see you. This is about, I'm gonna say December, so almost a year ago, or like 9-10 months ago. This is a retrospective, but glad to see you. Thank you so much for passing by. So yeah, pretty much, again, as I say, no surprise to the people that know me, I go to the gym since, did something, that, got a little bit of laugh. The Friday, or I guess the forum wraps up. Thank you so much for the well wishes, or the happy weekend wishes. Well, at the time, I'm not gonna lie, it was rough, but I can look back, things have worked out. I'm satisfied with where I am now. Ultimately, as I'm going to say in my final thoughts, I know it's for the best. And like I said, at the beginning of the stream, I've gone back and forth of whether I should give this write-up, whether I should be at least transparent from my perspective on this is my experience. Obviously, I've decided to, write it up, and now I have something to refer to, hey, if you want my experience with this company and what I went through, here it is, and here's all my evidence. But yeah, as I'm working out at the gym on Friday evening, I get a notification saying whatever. I have an email. So here's the email that I received from Zoya. Hi Corey, do you have a time for a quick call before Monday? As in, this was a Friday evening, so at around 8 p.m. or exactly 7:49 p.m. And so she wanted to set up a meeting sometime on the weekend before Monday starts. So my instinctual reaction was this doesn't seem like a good sign, but I thought maybe this company works on the weekends, or perhaps Zoya wanted to check in to see how my first week went. I respond agreeing to have a meeting the next day in the afternoon. So the Saturday rolls around, and the meeting time rolls around. The meeting with Zoya starts, and she cuts right to the chase. She said she doesn't have good news, and based off of the feedback from the team, they're terminating my employment. As I express my shock and attempt to maintain my composure, I ask if there's a particular reason why. Zoya emphasizes she's just the messenger, but according to the feedback from the team, which was unanimous, they didn't like my overall attitude and they perceived me to be passive-aggressive. Zoya asked me if there's anything that occurred throughout the week that would have resulted in the team giving this feedback. As I try to quickly recount the week in my head while still trying to maintain composure, I say there's nothing at all I can think of. I respond further, saying if the team perceived me that way is totally valid, but I certainly had no intention of ever being passive-aggressive. I emphasized to Zoya that I had never received this type of feedback before in my life, but even if it were true, I would have at least appreciated a chance to do better based off of the feedback. Additionally, if this was in fact the unanimous feedback from the team, I would have wanted them to at least say it to my face. To her credit, whether true or not, Zoya appeared to be sympathetic to my arguments. She expressed being impressed by my composure and said she'd go back to the team to see if I could get a second chance. I had no real expectation they would change their minds, but I appreciated the glimmer of hope and the positive feedback Zoya gave me about how I handled receiving the news. So I waited to hear from Zoya again. And so the next day rolls around, Sunday. No surprise to me, I receive word from Zoya the team is sticking to their decision. So Corey, I spoke with the team. Unfortunately, we will be unable to extend the employment at this point, but we are happy to meet with you to provide you honest feedback if that is helpful. Let me know if you would like to meet the team. If yes, they are available at 9:30 a.m. Tomorrow, which would be the Monday morning. So even though I had little hope at that point, the full devastation of being fired after just 5 days set in. I agreed to have the meeting since I essentially requested it, as there was definitely a part of me looking forward to the team giving all their feedback to my face. Genuine constructive criticism virtually never bothers me, especially if one has the courage to directly say it to my face. Since I had to pick up a sweater I brought into the office, due to the heat malfunctioning, the meeting would have to be in the office, which was scheduled for 9:30 a.m. the next day, Monday. After recounting the week in my head probably thousands of times in the past 24 hours, something seemed off about the team's feedback. Is it possible the whole team perceived me to be passive-aggressive and having a bad attitude? Sure. I always try to keep an open mind. But it was made clear to me all 3 team members felt the same, which, upon reflection, I thought was strange considering I spent the vast majority of my time with James and Jocelyn, and all of about maybe 2 hours throughout the entire week with Nellie, their third scientist. The more I thought about it, the more strange it seemed. I actually phoned Eliana to inform her of the news and solicit her own feedback, as we had been essentially working side by side throughout the entire week. She seemed just as shocked, and, much to her credit, said she'd be willing to essentially go to bat for me and defend me at the meeting. However, I decided it was best not to involve her. Since I had never been accused of having a bad attitude or being passive-aggressive, I was so curious what they were going to say about my attitude that the thought occurred to me to record the meeting for my own personal records. As mentioned at the beginning, I checked whether I could legally record without their consent, and turns out I could. So yeah, my original intention about a year ago or 10 months ago, it's like, well yeah, pretty much just to have it on record. I'm like, well, if they're going to say that I have a bad attitude, okay, which like I never, totally possible, and for sure, there's some people that like I don't get along with, but at least professionally, I had never received that feedback. I don't think I've ever received that feedback personally. Or like, yeah, the passive aggressive. And so like, you know, again, part of it was driven by curiosity of like, are they actually going to say this? And there was definitely some suspicion on my part. Like, this basically like didn't pass the smell test. As mentioned, okay, like, since I had gotten to know Eliana a little bit throughout the 5 days that I was there, okay, like I contacted her once I received this news that I was being fired. I was like, hey, like, you were there the whole time? Like, was there anything that you perceived as, like, passive-aggressive, or did you see something, that would, like, be an issue with my attitude? And I'm like, no. She had all positive things to say about me. I'll be interested to get that feedback, or just, yeah, like, you know, I try to be charitable, for sure, but, like, I'm also, you know, when necessary, like, I don't pull punches, and I get right to the point. So it's like, yeah, this is my original intention was essentially to record the meeting, to, like, actually have it on record, like, are they actually going to say this? Like, I'm genuinely curious of, like, what examples they're going to bring up. Like, here is Corey, like, being passive-aggressive, or, like, having a bad attitude. So, Monday. Okay, pretty much my final day there. I arrive at the office at around 9 a.m. and see that only Thomas is in the office. I figured I was technically early for the meeting, and James, Jocelyn, and Nellie would arrive later in time for the meeting. I set myself up in the conference room and take some time to mentally prepare myself. The start time of the meeting rolls around, and I start the conference call with Zoya and Nellie, who conveniently opted to not come into the office, is brought into the call. So yeah, as of that time, okay, Nellie chose not to come into the office that Monday morning. They chose to take that meeting virtually. I had seen her all the 5 days that I was there, but yeah, this last final meeting, she decided to stay home and take it virtually. So, Thomas then enters the conference room and sits at the table with James and Jocelyn, nowhere to be found so far. We make random small talk to kill time, hoping James and Jocelyn will arrive shortly. As it becomes abundantly clear they'll be significantly late, Zoe decides we should start the meeting. So, like, yeah, they're nowhere to be found. Basically, the entire meeting is supposed to be composed of their 3 scientists, James, Jocelyn, and Nellie, and me, and then Thomas and Zoya. So, Zoya would be virtually. They don't know that I'm presenting this, on Twitch. Like, I have, like, no contact, I have no direct contact with the company. So, and let's just say, since my leaving, okay, other things have come to light. So before breaking down the meeting and getting into the audio recordings, I'll summarize. No surprise to me, nothing about my attitude or being passive-aggressive was ever brought up. Nellie spent about 2 minutes nitpicking any mistakes she thought I made, even though my experiment was successful, pointed out I didn't take enough notes, which I admit to them I don't really take notes, where I then ask if there's anything else, to which she says no. Of course, she didn't have much feedback to give, considering I spent such a little time with her. At this point, Jocelyn, as it turns out, had also opted to take the meeting virtually and comes onto the call to give her feedback and inform us that James will eventually make it into the office for the meeting. The rest of the meeting was essentially my crucifixion, and all the feedback I received seemed to me like trivial excuses to get rid of me. But again, just my perspective. But I'm going to make the case for it. I say a few things in my defense, point out that none of them have teaching or mentoring experience, and I ask them explicitly, you're going to see in the audio recordings, I ask them, anybody here have teaching experience? And you'll hear their response. I highlight things I clearly got right, and when the meeting is concluded, I ask Thomas to stay behind so I can say my final piece. I let him know I think the decision to get rid of me is driven by insecurity, and James, Jocelyn, and Nellie are, I think, intimidated by my experience. Thomas said he wasn't really involved in the process, and they needed the buy-in from the whole team. Those are pretty much his words that he says multiple times, which they didn't have. Essentially, he's going on faith on what James, Jocelyn, and Nellie are saying. This makes sense given that Thomas has no experience in biology, biochemistry, life science, and is therefore not in a position to evaluate what goes on in the lab. I hand my office keys to Thomas and leave. So yeah, as I highlight in, the mini biography of Thomas there on their own website, is Thomas. He has mechanical engineering experience and physics experience. So not biology, not molecular biology, not biochemistry. So, context. So, throughout the week, I learned certain details about the team that I think may have been a factor in the decision to fire me. Of course, I don't actually know for sure. At the end of the day, I'm speculating, but I'm reasonably confident in my assessment. One is that James, Jocelyn, and Nellie all came from the same former company, Vessel Health, that also developed LFAs. As I learned during conversation with them, they consider it a fledgling, failing company. So this is from the Ellie Health website, the mini biography of the three scientists, although again, they have since revamped their website. Okay, so it's James, Jocelyn, and Nellie here. And they're also, on the Vessel Health website. Pretty well, you can even see Nellie, it's the same portrait picture, or profile picture. Where, they all came from this same former company. And at least what was told to me by James is James was hired by Ellie Health, and then he essentially brought in Jocelyn and Nellie, which, again, as I highlight here, not only that, but James and Jocelyn are romantic partners. And at the time, since Jocelyn was pregnant, they were both about to go on parental leave for the next few months. So James and Jocelyn, I believe, are married, or at the very least, romantic partners, and they were expecting a child at that point. So, they knew each other, all three of them, quite well. Lastly, another detail I learned about them is that if my math is correct, I have more research experience than all three of them combined. At the very least, individually, I was the most experienced researcher. The last bit of context to add is James, Jocelyn, and Nellie appeared to have expectations about how I should perform given my experience. I thought that was strange since they have only 2 days worth of actual work to evaluate me on, and from what I gathered throughout the week, none of them had teaching experience. So I asked them explicitly in the meeting if any of them have teaching experience. So here's where we get into a little bit of the audio recordings, where it's like, one of the, they brought up multiple times in the meeting of like, Corey, you didn't perform up to what I expected of you, given like what I saw of like your academic experience and your industry experience. And I thought that was strange, because they don't have like teaching experience. Like basically, where are their expectations coming from? So I guess I'll pause the background music. So here in the meeting, this is where I asked them if they have teaching experience. I don't know your full backgrounds, but do any of you have any extensive teaching experience, out of curiosity?
Not extensive. I think, I don't know, not to raise my hand, but I think I'm the one that enjoys teaching the most.
Have you ever mentored a student in the lab, or
just
supervised a fellow grad student, or
just training and tutoring?
Okay.
Not a very formal, not through university. I only have a bachelor's.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with it.
I would not. I haven't been in school for a while. That's my point.
I would not downplay your accomplishment. The bachelor's is no easy feat. So yeah. That's right, none of them have any teaching experience, but finally breaking the dead silence from no response, James says he enjoys teaching the most. As in, at that time, James, Jocelyn, and Nellie were there. They finally made it to the meeting. And they have no teaching experience. So, but James says he enjoys teaching the most. And as I say, or as I write, I enjoy a lot of things, but doesn't mean I'm any good at them. It's interesting how I didn't live up to the expectations of three scientists that have no mentoring or teaching experience. Considering I have more education and research experience than all of them, where are those expectations coming from? Sounds like when a culinary grad comes in and expects, pretty much hit the nail on the head. No. In fact, as I mentioned, did I? Yeah, right here. Another detail I learned about them is that if my math is correct, I have more research experience than all three of them combined. At the very least, individually, I was the most experienced researcher, as in James has a bachelor's degree, which, like, that's not inherently a bad thing, okay? Like, you can be a highly competent, technically speaking. I only have my bachelor's. I pursued my PhD. So yeah, and to prove that they were late, okay, so yeah, late to the meeting. As alluded to earlier, James and Jocelyn ended up being late to my final feedback meeting. Was there a moderate snowstorm that day? Yes. So yeah, just as proof they were late.
So I know James and Jocelyn are running a few minutes late, but we were hoping for them to be here when we started. I don't know how many minutes late. So Nelly, do you want to start when we wait for them?
There was a moderate snowstorm that day. However, this is not exactly unheard of in December in Quebec. I don't live super close to the office, and I made it on time. Apparently, they were on their way to the office together, but the snow was too much, so Jocelyn returned home to take the meeting virtually, and James eventually made it in. Either way, I can say with confidence that if I were part of a decision to terminate an employee, and it was their final meeting, it would have to be raining fire and brimstone to prevent me from making it on time. I personally find it, I can take it, not the end of the world for me, but I would say, a little bit disrespectful to be, late to a meeting on, the person's last day of work. So here's Nelly's feedback, which, I guess I'll do the text first, and then play the few minutes of the auto recording. So, as Nelly says herself, we had very little interactions with each other throughout the week. At most, it amounts to a couple of hours. Is she correct that I didn't take detailed notes, and Eliana's were much more detailed? Yes, absolutely. Is she correct that Eliana had the calculation information I was looking for in her notes? Yes, absolutely. Was this a mistake on my part? Yes, absolutely, which I'm okay with, as I'll explain in my response. Did my experiment end up being successful? Yes, as we will see. Did Eliana's experiment end up working? No. I say this not as a criticism of Eliana, since if I were training her, I wouldn't really expect her experiment to work out, nor would I have given her such an experiment anyways. I merely want to highlight that despite all my struggles with the experiment and my lack of notes, it still worked. Not to mention, Eliana and I both finished our experiments at the same time. Yeah, I mean, that's what they said. So, whatever. Who am I to question? So yeah, here's Nelly's full feedback. So we'll play all of it.
So we don't have to keep Corey waiting, but and I didn't get to work with you that much, Corey. I think I was busy working on verification.
So yeah, as she says, didn't get to work much with me.
This past week.
Yeah.
But which is like I know, like, I don't know, I think maybe because you have like a ton of experience and you didn't seem to be like taking a lot of notes when you were like training, and I suppose, like, and I don't want to compare, but Eliana was taking a lot of notes, and when it came to like, your personal individual projects, it seemed like you struggled a little bit because I guess you missed some details because you didn't take notes, and that was like the main outstanding factor. And like we said before, like, this is like super fast paced, and like I don't know if we conveyed that correctly, but as a startup company, it's like super fast paced, and just because you're not like, I don't know if you resonate with me, but because you were not taking notes, you struggled with your own personal project because of that, and you miss like we were saying attention to details and all that. You miss some important details, and so that was the main thing. And I know, like, maybe sometimes people don't take notes and they understand things differently in a way, but so like if you had like not taken notes and it was fine, and you came to your personal project and you still like excelled, it would have been fine. But then it seems like you struggle with your own personal projects because you missed some important details when we were training, and like, so maybe like, so you don't have to take notes, but maybe some people understand it differently. But it would have been fine if you had
If I may ask, what, like, based off of your perspective and your experience with me, what important details do you feel that I overlooked?
So like I remember when I was showing Eliana how to use the biodot, and you came in and I asked you like, oh, how's it going? And you were like, oh, I'm waiting for James to show me the next steps for like the calculations. And I was like, oh, what are you working on? And I remember you were doing something with cortisol, so you were using like 6614, and you were trying to look, you were like trying to remember the calculations. And Eliana was like, oh, we went through this yesterday. And she pulled out a notebook and she showed exactly, she was like, oh, it's 57 microliter per centimeter. So she remembered that because she took the notes, and she pointed exactly to the page on the notebook where she had the notes. So she remembered that because she took the notes, and she was like, oh, if you're using 6614. And that's, I think that's the only brief thing that I realized. And I was like, if you had taken your own notes, you would have remembered that. You know, it's like it was something simple like that you missed because you didn't take your own notes.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And if that's your perspective, totally understandable. And so is there any other major detail that you feel that I missed?
No, but also that's the other thing, like...
So, pretty much so far, just that one thing.
You just said right now that's your perspective. So we want someone who's like going to challenge you and say that's your total perspective. And I feel like you say that a lot, like anything. You didn't ask any specific questions. You said, oh, if that's your perspective. And so we want someone who's going to challenge and collaborate instead of just saying, oh, if that's your perspective, you know, something like that.
Sure. Again, that is totally fair. So pretty much just whatever that one thing. Because I ask her if there's anything else, and she says there's nothing else. And as she says there, towards the end, also, according to Nelly, they're looking for someone to challenge them. And she judged me as not having that ability since I gave diplomatic responses during my first week on a new job. But, as I say, to anybody that actually knows me, especially my online friends, I have absolutely no problem challenging anyone on virtually anything. Evidently, it was expected of me to go in there on day one with guns blazing and put everything they're doing under a microscope. The reality is, I actually did test the waters in challenging them, and they didn't seem up to the challenge. I bring this up later on in the meeting, okay? Where it's like, yeah, I have no problem challenging people. But like, yeah, their expectation is like, you know, from day one, I just like challenge everything. But I was prodding a little bit, okay? And based off of, at least, you know, I'm going based off vibes, my intuition. But based off of the little prodding that I did, okay, I got the sense that I should not do too much prodding. But here's my response, okay, to, well, Nelly's feedback. Like learning styles, and some people take notes, some people don't. And I will fully admit, and I'm transparent about the fact that do I take like the most detailed notes? Like absolutely not. I do tend to rely on memory, for sure. And also just in terms of my own learning style, like I'm sort of a fail fast and learn by doing. As in I just like to dive in, you know, make mistakes, as in I'm totally comfortable, generally speaking, with making mistakes. And I have no problem admitting that absolutely, almost certainly, well, guaranteed, I made mistakes throughout my time there in the experiment that I ran. So yeah, as I make it explicitly clear, and I'm always transparent about, I am not the most avid note taker. Well, I even write it here. As I'm transparent about, I am not an avid note taker. And yeah, well, it does almost seem like a setup. And you know, I'm trying to be not necessarily explicitly a setup, but like, yeah, or I was set up to fail. But yeah, they were hoping someone could come in and solve some problems, okay? So the notes I took throughout the entirety of my undergraduate degree probably couldn't fill a standard 200-page notebook. It is especially true that when it comes to learning skills, techniques, instruments, and protocols in the lab, I learn by doing. As in, like, when it comes to learning instruments, okay? Like, believe me, I'm not opposed to taking notes. Like, I take notes, but it's more like, I will dive in, I'll figure it out, and then I'll like write pretty much like my own protocol. Like here's the step-by-step process. As I say here, I will absolutely take notes and formalize protocols, but I will tend to do it afterwards when I have more context about what I'm doing and where I might have made a mistake. My electronic lab notebook detailing my graduate research is well detailed. And well, maybe as a small hint, as maybe as like a setup, or like, you know, they were trying to assess who I was, and you know, again, as I sort of try to make the case for, I might have been too competent for them. But yeah, there's this little bizarre interaction with Nelly, okay? I didn't interact much with her, as she says herself, okay? And even then, you know, she just latched on to, you know, the one mistake that she saw that I did, and like, that's it, I'm done. That's enough in her mind to convict, which is totally fine. That's the right. But there was, again, I'm speculating, but as a hint, in my mind, as to like, oh, you know, they were expecting, you know, someone not particularly competent, okay, because there was this like bizarre interaction, at least bizarre to me. Maybe I'm the awkward one, okay? Maybe I'm just socially incompetent, but like, I had never encountered this in my life, especially as someone who's literally taught hundreds of students. Like, I've never done this to a student. So since Nellie was the first to give her feedback, as James and Jocelyn weren't even there yet, it became clear their reasons for terminating me had nothing to do with any attitude I had or passive aggressiveness. As you heard, Nellie found one small mistake as the reason to get rid of me. Since she was questioning my competence based off of made-up expectations, I highlighted the fact that Nellie literally put me on the spot out of nowhere, and I gave the right answer. As in, I was given a pop quiz by Nellie. So I'll read the context, and then I'll play the clip. The context was, Eliana was shadowing Nellie in the lab, and I had a bit of downtime from being trained by Jocelyn. I was told I could go into the lab and shadow Nellie for a bit. I walk into the lab from the office space, and the second I walk into the lab, Nellie basically gives me a pop quiz about how to prepare a sample based off of the dilution she wants. After shaking off the mild shock at realizing she's asking me a question as soon as I walk through the door, I take a second to process and give the right answer. Was she asking me a particularly difficult question? No, not really. Thankfully, it was a dilution calculation I'm quite used to doing mentally at this point. Of the hundreds of students I have taught, have I ever put any of them on the spot like that? No. Would I ever do that to someone I'm training in their first few days? No. It is pure speculation on my part, but I'm reasonably sure she wasn't expecting me to get her question correct. So here's where I recount that situation to her in this final meeting. When Eliana was in the lab, and she was shadowing you, and then I came in a little bit later, you were running an experiment, and then pretty much as soon as like I approached you, you asked me a question about dilution, right? And you said, and I think I got that correct on the spot, right? And so where, like, yeah, as I outline, okay, like, I literally, you know, walk into the lab, and like the second that I walk in, okay, she like asked me a question of like, hey, I'm preparing this sample, okay, what volumes should I use if I want this type of dilution? And again, I've like come to my senses, okay, and then I process it, and then I give the right answer. But yeah, again, I don't know for sure, but I'm reasonably sure she wasn't expecting me to get her question correct, okay? And just that, to me, that seems bizarre to put someone on the spot like that. They set up post-hoc rationalizations for them, not expressing their needs well enough, and overhiring the position to where the founders were out of their depth. Yeah, that's definitely, I would say, that actually probably sums it up pretty nicely. I still don't see them explain the serious impact cost of the particular, yeah, I agree with you. Especially, as not only will I make clear, as they will say themselves, my experiment that I ran turned out just fine. So, Jocelyn lying, admitting negligence, or both? So after Nellie gave her feedback and essentially accused me of not paying attention to detail as a result of my lack of notes, as a demonstration of at least some ability to retain information, I responded by providing the example of when, during Friday's assay team meeting, I answered a question no one else knew the answer to. Okay, so I'll play that clip. Also, just I think as a testament, hopefully, to let's say details that I remember. Yeah, even outside this particular context, I remember on the assay meeting, you know, you were talking about materials and contamination from materials, and you were trying to do a deep dive on, you know, what is our serological pipette made of? What is the material? What are the micropipette tips made of? And the question was asked, well, do we know what the micropipette tips are made of? And no one else but me knew the answer, as in they're polypropylene. I actually double checked afterwards, and they are in fact polypropylene, the micropipette tips. And we'll return to this point in a moment. Where, yeah, not only as an example of, like, you know, I think I have some ability to remember things and details, but also maybe their reasons for them not knowing this information, I'd say, to me, is highly revealing. So during that meeting, when James was going over an experiment that he ran that did not work out, routine troubleshooting took place to try to understand why it didn't work. Not surprisingly, the issue of potential contamination was brought up, and essentially, could the materials being used in the lab be contaminating his samples? At one point, as I highlight, the question was posed of what the micropipette tips are made of. While I knew the answer immediately, I paused because I thought surely someone else would answer, and I'm generally not the type to jump at every opportunity to be the first to answer a question. After a few seconds of silence, when it became clear no one had the answer, I said I was reasonably sure they are made of polypropylene. Was I providing some groundbreaking piece of information? No, absolutely not. This is actually really basic information. The simplest of Google searches will tell you. Yeah, they did not know that. I've known 20 years, and even then, was it two monkey who just moved? But yeah, and even their explanation for not knowing that, as I say, that's either they're either lying, admitting negligence, or like it's both. Okay, so in this meeting on the Friday, okay, the assay team meeting where everyone goes over their experiments, myself included, okay, and it's like, yeah, the question was asked at one point is like, well, are some of the materials in the lab, okay, that we store our samples in, are they contaminating, something? And so, yeah, the question was asked is like, well, what are the micropipette tips made of? And like, as I say here, like, I knew the answer right away, but I did not say anything, okay? I was like, well, surely someone else is going to say something, I don't necessarily want to be, or again, I'm not always looking to like jump at every opportunity to like, oh, I know the answer, me. Even in a classroom setting, like when a teacher asks a question, like I'll generally know the answer, at least whatever, 70-80% of the time, but I'm pretty much never the first one to answer. No, I would say they're all mid-20s, mid to late 20s to mid to late 30s. Yeah. So pretty much, millennial, maybe older Gen Zers or whatever. Gen Zers to millennials, basically. At least of the people that I met. So yeah, this information of polypropylene, these are what the micropipette tips are made of. Like, again, this is not groundbreaking information. If you just put in what I put in Google search, you'll get polypropylene as the answer. Okay, so to the uninitiated, micropipette tips are, with maybe a few exceptions, the foundation to virtually every molecular biology life science research lab in the world. Practically akin to wheels on a car. There's a reason why you can buy them in bulk by the thousands. When Jocelyn provides the explanation as to why no one knew what they were made of, it is either a lie, a tacit admission they're negligent, incompetent, or both. I suspect it's both. So here's Jocelyn's response. So like, here's why we didn't know the answer to that question.
The pipette tips, what you were just saying, we did switch suppliers on pipette tips, so that's why we were like, what are they?
Yeah, sure.
Just because we weren't like exactly 100% sure, but that's a good thing to like call us out on, that we definitely should know.
No, and you are absolutely, sorry to cut you off, but you're absolutely correct that there are exceptions to that. Generally speaking, micropipette tips are made of polypropylene, like your standard pipette tips that you get for most distributors and suppliers. So yeah, her explanation is that they switched suppliers, okay? Which is like, whatever. Even if it's true, it's a bad answer. Okay. So while I can't prove it, her framing it as they weren't 100% sure. It's not that they, so in the meeting, as I say. So her framing it as they weren't 100% sure what they were made of in the assay meeting is a flat-out lie. When the question was posed, it was dead silent for a few seconds until I answered. As silent as when I asked if any of them had any teaching experience. Regardless, as mentioned, I think Jocelyn is both lying and unknowingly admitting they are incompetent. That is, Jocelyn is too incompetent and inexperienced to even understand the lie she's using is a really bad one. Why? Because, as highlighted, polypropylene is the most common material micropipette tips are made of. Even if you switch suppliers, you're exceptionally unlikely to get micropipette tips that aren't polypropylene. You practically have to go out of your way to not get micropipette tips that are polypropylene. Oh yeah, the glass-tipped ones, or, mouth pipetting, okay, definitely way before my time. However, the most egregious part is that if it were even true that them changing suppliers is the reason why they didn't know what they were made of, this would be a massive admission of negligence. Why? Because it would be admitting they changed suppliers of a fundamental component of their research lab without first confirming that what they're switching to is the exact same. They're a group of scientists, presumably trying to do rigorous research for the development of an at-home commercial hormonal testing device, and they changed suppliers of a critical component of the lab without confirming it's the exact same. That would be even worse than Hershey's changing their supplier of cocoa without confirming everything about the cocoa is the exact same. I don't actually know if Hershey's sources their own cocoa, but you get my point. Just hugely negligent. And I even asked ChatGPT, okay, the question. For a research lab, is it wise to change suppliers of micropipette tips without confirming the materials are the same? No, it is not wise to change suppliers of micropipette tips without confirming that the materials are the same. Consistency in the material of micropipette tips is crucial for maintaining the accuracy and reproducibility of experimental results. Different materials or even different grades of the same material can affect the performance of the pipette tips, such as their chemical resistance, sterility, and precision. Therefore, before switching suppliers, it's essential to confirm that the new tips are made of the same material and meet the same quality standards as those previously used. Additionally, conducting a validation test to ensure compatibility and performance consistency is recommended. So it's like, yeah, even if they did switch suppliers, okay, it would be negligent if they didn't actually confirm that what they were switching to is the exact same. That would be like poor scientific practice. This is like, again, a fundamental component of your lab, and you're just going to switch it out while you're trying to do, R&D. That would just be really bad. So, my experiment worked. As alluded to earlier, despite all the alleged struggles I had with my experiment, and despite the mistakes I made, and I did make mistakes, which I'm okay with, my experiment worked. I actually jokingly say multiple times in the meeting that my experiment must have failed in some way. I know it didn't, since there's not really any other reason to get rid of me. All of the feedback was just pointing out trivial mistakes that are easily correctable. James explicitly says my experiment was successful, and this has nothing to do with my experiment. And even after basically offering him an out to call it a failure, he corrects me and says my experiment was good. So I'll play that clip. Okay, and I appreciate that, and it's reassuring that it has nothing to do with my experiment, because again, I fully expected my experiment to fail, because again, like, my approach is just dive in, fail fast, and hopefully learn as quickly as possible from those failures. And so yeah, it's reassuring that my failure was at least in the ballpark of successful.
Yeah, it was a good experiment, not a failure.
So yeah, as mentioned, my even though, as they say in their corporate memo, they're a results-driven company. Okay, I got results. For only 2 days of any actual work I did, I was given a full experiment with having no prior experience with LFAs, and what I performed was successful. Technically, that's a 100% success rate, which evidently is not good enough. I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty confident the efficiency and quality of my work would have only improved from there. Not to mention, in the memo describing their culture and values, they claim one of their values is learning, and yet I was literally given no opportunity to do that. So yeah, going back to their corporate memo and, their definition of learning. So yeah, my final words to Thomas. Once the feedback meeting was over, I asked Thomas to stay behind in the conference room so I can say my final piece. At the end of the day, I didn't expect much from him, but I at least wanted to get my thoughts about what was going on out into the ether and see if he had anything at all to say about it. Based off of what Zoya had said to me on Saturday about the reasons for getting rid of me, I walked into the meeting somewhat under the impression it was for my attitude and supposed passive aggressiveness. I suspected this wasn't the actual reason, and as the meeting unfolded where nothing about their original reasons for firing me were mentioned, my initial suspicions were confirmed, and I believe I pieced it together. I asked Thomas about what he thought, and he actually admits that he's not really involved in the process, and they're simply trusting the team. So let me play that. From your perspective, what do you think I can improve on?
So ultimately, I was not a lot involved in this process. Like when it came to the lab, we let like the team lead the lab as a group, and like when someone new arrived, we need the buy-in of like everyone in the team. And in this case, we did not have like the buy-in of everyone in the team. So it's really like we listen to the team. That's what we're doing. So we're trying to. I think it was like kind of fast, maybe too fast this time. And something like I think we learned, but like in the position we are and in the situation we are with like all the ultra rush like deadlines coming, this happened.
Yeah, no, and I totally understand. Like you should generally take your team's feedback into account, as any, let's say, leader should. But I think, yeah, as you saw, like I didn't have much interaction with Nelly. I maybe had like a couple of. I think it maybe accumulates into like 30 minutes of interaction, and so like most of the feedback I think is coming from like James and Jocelyn, and I understand it's fast-paced, but I think it's fair to say that on Monday the onboarding, like I was mostly me and Eliana were listening, trying to take notes, and just try to assimilate as much information as possible, and then really it was only when we hit the ground running of like I think Wednesday and Thursday like in the lab doing experiments, and so like they were observing me, and I would say that that's a very like snap judgment to come to on that. Yeah, pretty much like two data points on a curve, at least coming from my scientist perspective, and that seems like very quick. Where I mean, again, this is just my experience. I would never judge a student based off of that little amount of information, and so it does seem like I'm being sort of like prematurely judged. So yeah, they needed the buy-in, or at least Thomas needed as he said, he's not really involved. It's just like the team said this, so he's just going along with it. And this is the co-founder / CTO of the company. Sounds like some strong personalities inadvertently creating a toxic culture where emotions. That's definitely, I would say, in my limited experience, okay, toxic. But obviously, I'm biased. Okay, clearly I'm biased. I almost want to make a joke that your accent is not thick enough for them because, well, yeah, like, so Thomas, I believe, is French, and which, in Quebec, I should be French, or at least, should be able to have a French accent. So, and as I say, like, they're literally, even though I was there for 5 days, okay, I only did 2 days worth of work, okay, so, like, 2 data points, and my experiment was successful, okay, so it's like, what more data do you need, I guess? Not that, like I said, I would never judge any student or any employee that I'm training on like just 2 days worth of work. That's just like ridiculous. I've never been a CTO or co-founder of a company, and likely never will be, nor have I ever been in any sort of significant leadership position. But I find it strange that a CTO is okay with a hands-off approach to hiring an R&D scientist for his own biotech company and just blindly trusting his team. Especially when only 2 days of actual work was done. The experiment was successful and literally no major issues were ever brought up. I explicitly outlined to Thomas, as mentioned, that I essentially had no interaction with Nelly, and so I'm only being judged by James and Jocelyn, who are in a romantic relationship. Thomas just reiterates the same response that they need the buy-in from the entire team, and if they don't, well, case closed. Somewhat reassuringly, Thomas himself mentions that no one is questioning my scientific skills. I mentioned that the pretty clear bias occurring, and again, not surprisingly, Thomas has nothing of substance to say. But like, if you feel like it would not be a good fit, that is totally fair, and that is totally valid. But I would say it seems like it's a little bit premature, where, again, Nelly had fully admitted that limited experience, and just judging off of like one interaction, and then the other 2 pieces of feedback are from 2 people who are in a romantic relationship.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, like at the beginning, if we hire you, it's because we believe like you will be like a culture fit, and you will be like you have the skills, and like nobody I think like put in question like your skills in the lab or like your scientific skills. But ultimately, like, if we don't have like the buy-in of everyone in the team, like, it's not working.
Yeah.
And I don't have like enough data points, as you said, like, to say anything. So that's why I was not like that involved in that process. It was more a process between like Zoya and the rest of the team. And for me, like, we need the buy-in. Ultimately, like,
absolutely,
we need the buy-in
totally understand
of everyone. But I'm hearing feedback. I'm hearing it could feel like very rushed. I totally understand, and we definitely will learn from this.
Right. Well, fair enough. But yeah, the buy-in from the team, that is 3 people right now from like the same company. And again, it's from 2 people that I spend most of the time with, where it looks like someone is making a snap judgment, and then like, I think the reality is you're relying on 2 people, right? But if that's how what you want to go by, like that's totally fair. But there appears to be maybe some bias there.
Yeah, I understand.
So, I try to point it out. Although, again, I didn't expect him to, be forthcoming or whatnot. You are correct, as in, like, Eliana is not there, so I did a little bit of a mini update. So at the end of my article, I point that out. So she's on the website, okay? There's a picture of her, but she's not part of the team. And I know she has left. I now know, so I guess maybe I'll update this. I'm reasonably sure she left the company voluntarily. Make of that what you will. And I know she has left the company voluntarily. And I have some other, insider information from now former employees. Where was I? So yeah, I didn't expect much of a response from Thomas, but as my final words to him, I told him my working hypothesis on what was going on and their motivations for getting rid of me. That is, James, Jocelyn, and Nellie are insecure, and they don't want anyone coming in with any real expertise to take a close look at what they're doing. Moreover, given that James and Jocelyn were about to go on parental leave, they don't want anyone to come in and overshadow them or potentially expose any shortcomings. No surprise, given the choice between Eliana, who literally just graduated and landed their first industry job, and someone with considerable knowledge, experience, and expertise, they get rid of me and retain Eliana. It's much easier to pull the wool over someone's eyes or keep them under your thumb when they lack the knowledge and experience. Again, I say this not as a criticism of Eliana, but simply a description of the reality and as an incrimination of James, Jocelyn, and Nellie. So they've recently redesigned their website, okay? Which, yeah, it feels... So, the previous screenshots that I have, okay, they're all from the old version. If you go into, like, the Wayback Machine, and put in their website, you can see what the old version looked like, which I think was much better. So yeah, here was pretty much, my final thoughts to Thomas and pretty much my working hypothesis. Okay, don't know for sure, but just what I thought was going on. We all have to make decisions with information available to us. But to be totally frank, I think their decision is coming from a place of insecurity. And I think they might be intimidated by me. Because I think I might have exposed some things that might not be working optimally or room for improvements. And that's where it gets tricky for me, where if I ask too many questions, and Nellie says they want to be challenged, but then if I challenge too much, it might get held against me, right? And so it's a little bit of a no-win situation. And this is just my working hypothesis. I absolutely have no idea at all. But my intuition strongly suggests that this is coming from a place of insecurity. Or ego, and they don't necessarily want someone with my knowledge and expertise to maybe change things or maybe expose things, and which is totally understandable because maybe they have concerns in terms of, from what I understand, they're going on parental leave soon, And so they might be hands off from the company for a little bit of time. And so there might be some fear of like someone coming in and maybe exposing some things, or maybe this would not be my intention, but overshadowing them. And I try to come always from a place of learning and humility. But what I can say with maybe some confidence is I think my ceiling is higher in terms of level of performance than what is currently here. But again, if that's not sufficient, and I'll relay that to Zoya if hopefully I get another chance to speak with her.
Yeah. You
But
will definitely have a chance to speak with her.
Oh, Cabodox, welcome. Great to see you. It's been a minute. I hope you're doing well. So at least the topic for today, okay, so I'm streaming now, and I plan to stream again tomorrow. But the topic today is just going over this piece that I've written, this Substack. You can find the link in the Discord, or well, I guess if you can make it out through here, or I guess I can maybe even, put the link in the chat. But basically, going over my experience working, being hired and fired for a biotech company over the course of 5 days. And I've written my experience about it. But I plan to be streaming tomorrow, getting back to covering research and news, where there's a paper that I plan to cover tomorrow that I'm actually pretty reasonably excited about. So yeah, as alluded to later in the day, so my working hypothesis, again, as I say, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure, and I've had some contact with some former employees that I think back up my hypothesis in that, those three scientists there, they're essentially trying to protect themselves, where they don't seem to be the most knowledgeable, and in my very limited experience, not the most competent, and so I think they're just trying to protect themselves, and they don't want anybody, overshadowing them. And again, as I sort of make explicitly clear, and again, I might be arrogant, totally, but as I say to Thomas, I think my ceiling of performance is way higher than either James, Jocelyn, or Nelly. And if they don't want that, well, that's the right to not want that. But yeah, those are my final thoughts, basically, to Thomas. And then I left. So, as alluded to earlier, later in the day I had a final call with Zoya. I don't know for sure, but I got the sense she pieced together that I was being sacrificed like a lamb to the slaughter. I asked her what she thought about what occurred during the meeting and them firing me, and I think her exact words were along the lines of, "There's no use in beating a dead horse." Any attempt to solicit any of her thoughts just resulted in seemingly canned company responses, which is understandable since she wouldn't want to incriminate herself or side with me over the company. I don't blame her, but if in fact she came to the same conclusion I did of what was occurring, it's frustrating she wasn't willing to say it or call a spade a spade. Thank you for the kind words, Cabodox. Much appreciated. And as I say here, as I will say in my final thoughts here, like I'm overall happy with, how things played out, 9-10 months later. And so good question, Orange, as always. So they are a venture-backed company, okay? Whereas I outlined in the beginning, there's an article about some of their fund. Well, they have raised millions of dollars in funding. Should be, right here. I guess I should need to go into incognito. Where, there are a bunch. Oh my goodness. There are a bunch of, let's say, venture capitalists that have invested in this company. Although, okay, so even though I was only there for 5 days, okay, I got a little bit of insight into their corporate timeline. Okay, so like as of right now, okay, they don't have money coming in from like product sales. Okay, obviously if you go to their website, okay, there's just the option to join the wait list. And yeah, well, they're essentially constantly hiring. Okay, but while I was there, on day one, I got their corporate presentation. Okay, of like here's our timeline of when we expect to launch our product. Okay, as in at the time when I was hired, or pretty much the end of November last year. Okay, they were looking. Their timeline is like the first quarter of this year, 2024, they would have launched their product. Okay, as in they'd have money coming in from that. Okay, well, the first quarter of 2024 has come and gone, and the second quarter has come and gone. We're now like what? I think we're wrapping up Q3 or starting into Q4. Either way, based off of the timeline that was given to me, they have far exceeded their deadline of launching their product. But maybe things have been revised, since I have left. Who knows? And yeah, they essentially appear to be constantly hiring. Okay. And like another reason why I want to, put this out into not only put this out into the ether, but make it public, is like, well, okay, at least if I can prevent someone else going through what I went through, then, great. So, wrapping up my final thoughts. So, while the week or so following this was somewhat difficult to process, in the end, I know it's for the best, and I'm overall satisfied with the trajectory my life has taken since then. I wouldn't want to work for a company that doesn't actually live up to the values they claim to have. To be honest, as I was progressing through the interview process, I was slowly starting to believe this company was different and was actually attempting to do something better. I was mistaken, of course. All the values the company espouses are just a shiny veneer masking what looks to me like a pretty rotten core. In my limited experience, and based off of what I hear from my friends, colleagues in biotech, this seems par for the course when it comes to companies. Yeah, almost intentional incompetence, absolutely. Despite the negative experience and roller coaster ride, I am proud of the 2 days of work I did, my successful experiment, and the way I handled myself overall throughout the entire situation. Perhaps I'm ignorant or naive, but one of the things that stings the most is being disheartened with now knowing people like this exist that are capable of treating people this way. Have I encountered bad actors and mean-spirited people before? Absolutely. But something about the snap judgment, two-facedness, and seeming lack of integrity hits different. I don't know how people like that sleep at night or look at themselves in the mirror, but at the end of the day, it's not my concern. As an actual scientist, while I'm driven by curiosity, I think a good scientist needs to understand that some questions will never be answered. It may just be me coping, but in a way, it's a compliment they were threatened by my competence so much and so quickly that they immediately chose to get rid of me unanimously. There's a small part of me that feels a bit sorry for Thomas and Marina. Neither of them have the knowledge or expertise to go in and fully evaluate what's actually going on in their own company's lab. As Thomas explicitly says, they just trust the team. They have placed a bet on a racehorse, James, Jocelyn, and Nellie, and they have no choice but to ride it until the end. As highlighted earlier, the current state of academia and biotech doesn't seem conducive to carrying out high-quality research. I'm not entirely sure what has gone wrong, and it's likely not just one thing, but I have effectively been pushed out. In this case, not exactly voluntarily. Do I think I can find another job in biotech doing interesting research at another company? Probably, but I'm not exactly enthusiastic about working for another company. As I say to people about my current choice to be self-employed, if things don't work out or I turn out to be a bad employee, I'm okay with laying myself off or firing myself if need be. I'd rather have my fate in my own hands, since putting it in the hands of others so far has not worked out. In addition to the bad incentives already mentioned, part of the problem seems to be that highly credentialed people with a deep technical expertise in one domain seem to think it translates into every other domain. That is, if you're an expert in, say, nanochemistry, then you must be an expert in every other domain of human knowledge, even leadership. It is so interesting observing highly credentialed scientists and scientific companies behave so unscientifically. It's great that you have a PhD in STEM and a postdoc or 2 or 3, but that doesn't mean you know what it takes to be an effective leader or manager. It's clear to me most scientists in leadership roles don't seem to be aware that there's actual scientific research on effective leadership, and I provide references as examples. I'd like to see the scientist who's in a leadership position and berating an employee justify their behavior with any sort of scientific evidence that that's effective leadership. Or being late to meetings while expecting everyone else to be on time. And these are just the smallest of examples. It's interesting browsing job postings from biotech companies, and they all say must have XYZ experience, and yet based off of the research, pre-hire work experience is a mediocre predictor of future job performance. Which, like, yeah, there's the, as usual, I provide references and try to back up what I say. Of, like, one of the, another reason why, I don't, as of right now, I'm not subjecting myself to another hiring process. It's because, like, the hiring process pretty much seems, artificial. And, not an overall good selection process. So, like, every job posting says, if you want this job, you need to have this experience. Even though, like, that doesn't seem to be a good marker to assess the competence of a person. Are there exceptions? Of course, but there are likely better things to select for. From my experience coaching people towards their health and fitness goals as a personal trainer, the major challenge for people is not the cognitive knowledge. Most people already know to eat less and move more. Ultimately, it's the psychological game that will make or break you. The concept that just because you know something about physics or chemistry doesn't mean you know much of anything else is not my original idea. It goes all the way back to Socrates in the Republic. Thank you so much for passing by. I hope you enjoy your lunch. And well, at the time, disappointing, but I can look back and, whatever, smile and laugh and talk about it. But yeah, as always, super appreciated to have you here. And until next time, take care and be well. And yeah, am I jaded by this experience? I've certainly had moments, but no, absolutely not. I'm still an eternal optimist and still believe the best in people. Throughout this entire experience, the aftermath since, and basically my entire life, I have been reminded of the good in people by all the support I've received from everyone around me. From both my biological and chosen family, I'm fortunate to have been born into a family that fully supports me, as I know not everyone has that luxury. I'm also thankful to have the judgment, for whatever reason, to have chosen and kept people around me that have been there for me and or have served as a reminder of the good that exists in people, blah, blah, blah. I don't think I'm going to read the rest, since it's pretty much just me, giving my final thoughts. And thanking, friends, family, and my online community, such as yourself, Orange, Cabadox, Jack, Bob Marley, and anyone else that's part of this community. But like, yeah. I think I'm gonna, there's only a few paragraphs left. Where, if you want to read it on your own, obviously the link is in the Discord. Feel free to join. Get the link there. And actually this took longer than I anticipated, which is not a bad thing. But pretty much got through the bulk, or at least, at the very least, I got through my experience with the company. And the rest is just like my final thoughts or wrapping up. And, a little bit of me getting on my soapbox, preaching about whatever, the state of science, both academia and industry, but still, being thankful for the opportunity, etc., etc. So I think I'm gonna at least stop reading my Substack here. I'm like, it will be available. I plan to make it available to the public, this upcoming week. And so to wrap up, not much time to cover science and research. So I think what I'm gonna do is gonna do some games, the New York Times connections. But I plan to be back tomorrow, pretty much at around the same time, to get back to covering science, news, and research. Okay, I'm covering a research paper tomorrow. National, talk, slip, Latin, jargon, steal, budget, tiptoe, Whispers. Environ. I'm not even sure I know what that is, or some sort of related to environment. Plead. Enterprise. Creep. Speculation. Thrifty. Rumbling. Talk. Whispers. Whisper. Speculation. Tip. Rumbling. Like, these definitely just seem like overall whatever. People saying things behind your back. Yeah. Exactly. Like I said, I know it's for the best. And yeah, dodged a bullet. And I think it's telling, like I said, that Eliana, they have left voluntarily. And I know I've been in some contact with another former employee that has since left. They left a little bit after me, after being there for 2 years. And I actually met up with them. And, they pretty much backed up everything that I had to say about them. So, we'll see, who knows? Maybe this company will be successful, we'll find out. The only thing that I can say, it's like, yeah, at least according to the timeline that they gave me when I was there, getting their corporate presentation. They're supposed to have a product launch by this time. Talk, whisper, yeah, my intuition says this. Okay, hearsay. Alright, fair enough. Jargon, steal, budget, tiptoe, national. Creep and slip and tiptoe. Kind of like, whatever. Stealthily walking around, I guess. Give them the slip. Creep around, tiptoe around. But then I don't know what the fourth one would be. Latin around, thrifty around. Budget around. Unless environ, like I don't know what environ means, personally. So like, maybe that's a way of like whatever, stealthily getting around. One away. Okay. I think there's a budget rent-a-car and there's an enterprise rent-a-car. I feel like I have those commercials in my brain somewhere. If that's, are there any other rental? I have to assume there's a national rent-a-car. Is there a thrifty rent-a-car? I don't think there's a jargon, steal, tiptoe rent-a-car. Just gonna go with it. Okay, well, a little bit lucky there. I definitely know budget enterprise. And like, I think I knew national, but thrifty, I don't think I've ever heard of a thrifty rent-a-car. What would be the rest? Creep, slip, tiptoe, steal. I don't know. Give someone the slip, tiptoe around, creep around, steal around. Ooh. Oh, okay. Well, jargon has argon. Okay, my chemistry brain might be doing something. Environ has iron. Plead has lead. Sort of word association. I mean, yeah, in effect, word association, but like, pretty much create 4 groups of 4. So this was a grid of 16 things, okay? And so there was rumbling, speculation, talk under the category of like hearsay. So yeah, it is effectively. So plead has lead in it, and Latin has tin in it. That doesn't seem like a coincidence. Where I think these are words with elements in it. You have argon, you have iron, you have lead, you have tin. That cannot be a coincidence. Okay. Well, whatever. My chemistry background, good for something. Oh, Smash, welcome. Great to see you. Dude, does steal mean sneak? I've never heard of, like, I've heard of, like, you know, whatever, to creep around, to whatever, give someone the slip, and, you know, obviously tiptoe, but steal, I've never heard of, like, steal around. Well, I only got this one by process of elimination. Alright. Another... Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, definitely, I'd appreciate no answers. Okay. Where? I have to assume this is somewhere in the United States. Some army base. I see what looks like Bahrain here on a map. Location. Oh, Parallax, welcome. Great to see you. Hope you're doing well. Location and year. As in, I got a pin on the map, and I got to, well, choose the year on the map. Yeah, you can help with the definition. Magazines, are there any giveaway? I can't make out really any titles there, but they look like they're in English. I mean, I see like NSA Bahrain here. No, I've never heard of, like, so I've heard of Steal the Night. But to me that, like, that doesn't speak to, like, you know, whatever, moving stealthily. But yeah, I guess Steal the Night as the expression. But I definitely don't think of, like, moving stealthily around. I only know the Ozzy Oz song, Crazy Train, which is a fantastic song. I'm gonna have to go with just, like, whatever. This looks like... Okay, well, I can try to guess out the year by the computer screen, okay? This is not, you know, this might just be a poorly funded, whatever, Boy Scout or military base. I don't know. But it doesn't look like a super fancy computer screen, okay? This looks more like, I would say, you know, mid-2000s, mid to late 2000s. Okay. But the location, I don't know. I'm just gonna go, whatever, somewhere in Washington, D.C. Signed pick. Not sure what... Oh, this sign. Too blurry for me. I think I make out like an American flag. I'm gonna go with, like... Let me get a look at that computer screen again. Yeah, and there's a print... This looks like a printer, okay? And, like, you know, not a super fancy printer. Or, like, yeah, one of those old school printers. Let's say, you know, yeah. Just go with... I don't know what these, you know, I don't know whatever the makeup of Bahrain. I believe it might even be a challenge to, like, locate. I know it's, I believe it's somewhere around... I always get Bahrain and Bhutan sort of, like, messed up. Yeah, Bhutan's here. Okay. I think Bahrain is somewhere here? Yeah, I couldn't even, or somewhere... No, I just gotta go with... Gonna go with my intuition. My intuition was somewhere in, whatever, the District of Columbia. If it's a naval base, then you get all the credit. I think, yeah, 2000. Oh, I guess it was actually, yeah, Bahrain. I should have went with the obvious, I guess. But either way, I'm happy with the year. I wasn't too far off with the year. Okay, that computer screen, I think, got that on the nose. That's what I thought too, but no, I was wrong. It was actually Bahrain. Okay, an Iowa license plate. Okay, but, like, is this just, like, misdirection? Like, English signs, shoes. Almond trouts. I'm not gonna look at chat for this one. I mean, I have to assume with the multiple Iowa license plates, okay? I don't know why a bunch of cars with Iowa license plates would be congregating anywhere else outside of Iowa, but you never know. Now the question is Iowa. I know Idaho is here. Ohio. I think it goes Minnesota. Yeah, Iowa right here. We're just gonna go with Des Moines, Iowa. Now, based off of the cars, I think... I'm not gonna look at chat. This gives me, well, so my guiding principle for a lot of these things is, like, Back to the Future. How, like, these cars look like Back to the Future cars, so 1955. Actually, maybe a little bit earlier. Maybe, like, 19 Oh, even earlier. Okay. So location, not too bad. It was in Iowa. But I was 11 years off. Okay. License plates. Can't really make that out. Oh, was it? Oh. I guess I'm not paying enough attention to detail. Well, this is one of those times where, you know, given the fact that I'm half Chinese, I wish I had the ability to read either Cantonese or Mandarin. Just to either eliminate whether this is Cantonese or Mandarin. This could be whatever. Chinese, Japanese, or some other Asian language, I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's not Korean. Thank you. That is an acceptable hint. But if you know the answer, do not give the answer. Like, these do, at least my intuition says that these are Chinese characters. Like, I could definitely tell the difference, generally speaking, between, you know, Chinese characters, Japanese, and Korean. But there's nothing on the license plates. We're just gonna go with the whatever. Well, China's a big country, obviously. Even though this is almost certainly not Beijing, China. The year. Okay, cars. Anybody holding a cell phone? Oh, well, it says Chinatown here. Would there be a Chinatown in China? Probably not. I'm pretty sure these are not Japanese characters. So... I guess we'll go somewhere in Thailand. We'll go with Bangkok, Thailand. Well, yeah, exactly. That's why I'm revising my answer. Okay, cars. Unfortunately, there's nobody here on a cell phone, but the cars look pretty modern. You have what looks like a Mini. I'm gonna go like 2015. Ooh. Okay, well, pretty lucky. Whatever. I'll take credit for the year. The location is pretty much just a guess. I got lucky just by seeing that there was a Chinatown sign there, and I don't think you're gonna find Chinatown in Chinatown. Okay. What's on the map here? I don't know what that writing is. Doesn't look English. This looks somewhere in Europe, but I have no idea where. It's not English. It's too blurry to make out anything. Yeah. I don't know what that language is. I'm just gonna go whatever. Somewhere in Belarus. But the year, I think I can get somewhere the year. So this bus is giving me, well, actually, somewhere in the 60s. 60 to 70s, I think. It's a color picture. I think 72. Okay. Oh, I wasn't... I'll take it. Good enough for me. Okay. Well, British Railways. Although I assume they have British Railways outside of... Although this is like a double-decker bus. Should probably not overthink it. This is in whatever. London. The most stereotypical answer. And the year, black and white photo, cars. I think this is somewhere in the 40s. Go 43. I don't know, black and white. I don't even, we'll go for it. Oh, I was way off in the year. Got 0 on the year. But yeah, location, okay. I'll take it. Well, you're better for the year than I was. Got a little bit lucky with the location. 33,000. I'll take it. Not too bad. Well, either way, I'm happy I got the connections. Not my best time guesser performance. Alright, so that's pretty well. At the end of the day, all I really wanted to cover, at the bare minimum, was, I guess, sounds a little bit weird to say, but my Substack. And well, actually, I plan to write more Substacks on actual topics, not just my experience of stuff. We'll see how that goes. I mean, they're fun, although sometimes they're frustrating. Like, yeah, that connections. Like, some of the connections are, like, really good. But this one, like, I would have never, yeah, never heard, steel in the context of, like, stealthily moving around. Although what Parallax brought up, like, that makes sense now that I know about it. But I never would have made this connection. Like, I was making the connection with creep, slip, and tiptoe, but, like, steel's way off my radar. And I guess I got maybe a little bit lucky in that I was able to make the connection between the elements. I saw that there's argon, tin, lead, and iron. I'm curious how other people perform on this one. But in other times, like, this connection's pretty good. Other ones are just, like, at least way too obscure for me. But maybe I'm just an idiot. But yeah, that's all I had planned for today. So I plan to be back tomorrow, actually getting back to covering, science and research. Okay. Probably going to save this for tomorrow, but I'm going to be covering a paper that I want to cover tomorrow. Not this one, although I do want to cover this one at one point. But I'm going to cover, where is it? Yes, this one. The catalytic antibodies, in the context of some research on chronic fatigue syndrome, myalgic encephalomyelitis. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by OOL research. I mean, I'm sure somewhere in my brain I've come across that acronym. But I'm not 100% sure what you mean by OOL. But gotcha. Technically, yes. Like, let's just say, at least from what I understand of origin of life research, I would say that would be largely in the field of microbiology, or at least microbiology adjacent. So I can technically, let's say, if I wanted to, I could apply for graduate studies in a microbiology lab that is probably working on origin of life research. But would I be, let's just say, if there was another candidate that did like a full microbiology degree, okay, like they should probably pick them over me. Where it technically makes me qualified, but I would say not the most qualified. I would say it's like partially in my lane. Strictly speaking, I'm like a biochemist, molecular biologist. And like definitely not a microbiologist, even though like I've taken multiple microbiology courses and advanced microbiology courses. Like strictly speaking, my background is not microbiology. Like I'd say my background is pretty strong, but definitely not as strong as someone who's strictly done a microbiology degree. Where this is right in my wheel. This is in my lane, which is why I want to cover it. I plan to cover it tomorrow. I think it's a really cool paper. Obviously, I don't expect anyone else to really agree with me that this is a cool paper, but I think it's cool, so I'm going to cover it. Especially in the context of like, well, they are doing research on actual patients, okay, that have chronic fatigue syndrome, whoopsies, close, myalgic encephalomyelitis. And they're doing some analysis of like, as of right now, not that I'm an expert on chronic fatigue syndrome, but like, it's hard, or let's say difficult to diagnose, or it's difficult to observe things that are physiologically, wrong, or, abnormal. In chronic fatigue syndrome patients, or rather like in a research setting, okay, and when we run, okay, a bunch of tests on them. So outside of a clinical setting, like going into a doctor's office, generally speaking, okay, most of the biomarkers that, let's say, a medical doctor screens for, okay, nothing really stands out when it comes to chronic fatigue syndrome or myalgic encephalomyelitis. But when you get into the nitty-gritty research, in a research setting, like we find things that are different about chronic fatigue syndrome patients, and this appears to be one of them, the catalytic autoantibodies. But this is preliminary research, where I believe they only analyzed a handful of patients. I think it's like 12 to 20 or so. Yeah. So they have 19 chronic fatigue syndrome patients, 19 healthy controls, and 3 multiple sclerosis patients. So yeah, small sample size. But either way, they're doing actual research using patient samples. And in my mind, they find some pretty cool things These catalytic antibodies are pretty cool, at least again from a biochemistry perspective. And so yeah, not only do I plan to cover this tomorrow, hopefully I can cover other things as well. And I plan to get back to the biochemistry lectures on the Wednesdays. Okay, we had to take a break, about 2 weeks ago because my student had a wedding, and then unfortunately they can't make the commitment for the future lectures. Okay, so I'm now doing the lectures solo, which is not inherently like a bad thing. Potentially allows me to take questions from the audience and focus maybe a little bit more on chat. But yeah, I'm still planning to continue with the biochem lectures. It'll just be now solo, at least for now. And maybe for the foreseeable future. Oh, and Kitty, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. Always great to see you, and hope you're doing well. It's up to you. Like, you're welcome to join in chat, which you do anyways. But no, we'll see how the solo goes. I have no doubt that it'll go well. But yeah, that's the plan for, let's say, this upcoming week. Cover this tomorrow and probably a few other things, and then getting back to covering textbook biochemistry on Wednesday. So let's see if I can maybe find someone to raid. Not really. Doesn't seem to be any other science. No. I guess we will just end it, which is totally fine. But yeah, so thank you everyone for passing by. Okay, so that was my experience with, my brief experience with that biotech startup. And like I said, at the end of the day, things have worked out for the best. As you said, Jack, dodged a bullet. And yeah, thank you everyone for passing by. Jack, super appreciated. Kitty, always a pleasure. Again, hope you're doing well. Orange, thank you so much for passing by. And anybody else that I forgot, Cabadox, Parallax, Smash, always great to see everyone. Yep, exactly. Trying to dodge those bullets. Yeah, thank you everyone for passing by. Super appreciated. Plan to be back tomorrow, getting back to my usual streams, covering research. And until then, take care and be well.